Now to a story that we've been covering extensively here on Redacted, the story of the coming invasion of Haiti by the United States and a willing coalition of allies. Now, up until recently, the mainstream media has been largely ignoring this story, and then something changed. Maybe it was the midterm elections. I don't know. Where they're now keen to want to cover this story. It's hard to tell. But the New York Times out with a big story just a short few days ago about the impending invasion of Haiti by the United States government. So for more on that story, we wanted to bring in journalist from Uncaptured Media, Dan Cohen, who just returned from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, who did an amazing job filing reports for Redacted down there. Dan, welcome back. It's good to have you back here in the studio.
Great to be back. Thanks, Clayton.
So amazing job down there. Now, what you were seeing on the ground was contradicting a lot of the reports that we were hearing from the mainstream media. So were you surprised, first of all, seeing this New York Times piece come out? A pretty big story, a pretty big deep dive into what's going on in Haiti and about this U.S. invasion or wanting an invasion of Haiti.
Well, firstly, I think it's remarkable to see the New York Times now saying that this U.S. invasion of Haiti is imminent, because that's what I reported back in September, and that largely fell on deaf ears, especially in the mainstream media. It was totally ignored that I had from the former U.S. envoy to Haiti, Dan Foote, saying we're either going to send a hit squad or we're going to send a full-on U.S. invasion, and that was ignored until now, post midterms. So it suggests that there are political motivations. But nonetheless, now it seems it's time for narrative control to basically tell the public why the U.S. has to intervene in Haiti and put it in nice flowery terms that it's some kind of humanitarian mission. But obviously, I think probably most of Redacted's viewers are not gullible to believe that. So I think it's really important to parse out. And I just saw so many deceptions, so many lies, when I was down there with my own eyes. The media is saying one thing and I'm seeing another.
Specifically, you can talk about, I want to talk about that humanitarian crisis that you call out as total BS here in a second. But just give us an example. Give us like 3 examples of lies that the Western media was telling about Haiti and what you were seeing on the ground.
Well, for one thing, they were saying, there's no gas, there's no fuel whatsoever because of this barricade by this armed group and this monster named Barbecue. And as it turns out, there are 3 fuel terminals in Port-au-Prince alone. And I, myself and my producer, Kim Ives, we were flying my drone all around Port-au-Prince, and we captured footage of these oil tankers coming from other countries, unloading fuel without any problem. And so, clearly there is fuel coming into the country. There is also fuel coming in from the Dominican Republic, despite protests against it in the border regions. So that was one lie. There was a fuel shortage, but it was not what they said it was. And the blame was not what they said it was. Second, there was these claims that this fuel shortage is causing the hospital to cease operations. We went to the hospital, interviewed the general director, and she said, well, yes, we have shortages, but these have been ongoing for months and months, long before the blockade and long before even the cuts to fuel subsidies that the puppet interim prime minister imposed. So suddenly that becomes a narrative, but those have been there all along. One of the biggest deceptions that I saw was the claim of a cholera outbreak, which of course there was cholera in Haiti, but this was blamed by the US government and the corporate media on the FRG-9's barricade on that fuel terminal. So they blockade the terminal and suddenly everyone gets cholera. I don't know how that's supposed to make sense, but in mainstream media world, apparently you just go along with it. But the reality is cholera has been there all along. I spoke to people on the ground. I spoke to missionary health professionals who have been going there every year, and they see cholera every time they treat people for cholera. And it's not because of a barricade on a fuel terminal. It's because people particularly in the neighborhood of Cité Soleil, which is the most exploited, impoverished slum in the Western Hemisphere, lives in a literal lake of sewage, worse conditions than I've ever seen in anywhere I've ever been, reporting in the world. People live in a lake of sewage that comes down from the hills of Port-au-Prince, and the government chooses to not dredge the canals that are supposed to flow into the Caribbean Sea. And so because people live in sewage, you get all kinds of pathogens. You get dysentery, you get malaria, and you get, of course, cholera. So that's always there. And the pretext then is always there. So a total canard, once again, from the mainstream media. There are so many deceptions. Also, the idea that barbecue and the G9, the FRG9, were selling gas. They're taking it and selling gas to, on the black market and making huge amounts of money. They didn't have the technical expertise to even go into the gas terminal and get it. It's not like you go to the pump and just turn it on. You have to have engineers, et cetera, to be able to operate this fuel terminal to take it. So the technical side was infeasible for them, let alone for them, it was about principle. It wasn't about making money. But that's the whole game, is to smear them as just gangsters rather than people with principles.
Oh, you mean just like how the United States goes into other countries like Syria and goes to their fuel terminals and oil depots and actually has the technical expertise to steal their oil, which is, of course, what they're doing in a lot of these occupied countries. So I love that we call that out. Now, one of the things, of course, in this New York Times piece is the humanitarian angle. And it says, I'm just going to quote from the New York Times. It says, now fearing that the humanitarian crisis engulfing Haiti could spur mass migration to the United States and elsewhere, some top Biden administration officials are pushing to send a multinational armed force to the country. Several current and former officials say, after the Haitian government made an appeal for such an intervention last month. By the way, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the Biden administration. Doesn't seem like they give a rat's behind about mass migration coming across the United States border, but they're suddenly worried about Haitian migration. This sounds like it doesn't even pass the smell test.
Well, they've actually been deporting huge amounts of Haitians. There are ICE flights on a near daily basis. I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but huge amounts of Haitians who have left their country, gone through Latin America, all through Central America, into Mexico. They get to the border and then, either they come in or many of them get deported on expensive charter flights. So on one hand, the Biden administration is saying, well, the situation is so horrible there. And in many ways it is. But at the same time, they're going to deport people there. And then say, oh, we have to carry out this humanitarian intervention.
Right. It doesn't really add up. Also, so the troop angle of this. So the United States, according to the New York Times, doesn't want its own troops included in this force. But according to the numbers, they're saying, they could send 2,500 United States members of the military there. So it sounds like the United States, according to the New York Times, is actively pushing to send an armed force, but it doesn't want to be the country that does it. So they've been calling on Brazil and Canada, but they seem hesitant, according to the New York Times. Can you unpack that part for us?
Right. So even despite the barricade being overthrown, the barricade on that fuel terminal that Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier and the FRG9 had for 5.5 weeks, that was overthrown because the U.S. and Canada sent in armored vehicles. They delivered those to the Haitian police, and that gave them the firepower to be able to take out the barricade, to overcome it. The U.S. still says, oh, well, we still want the intervention, even though the pretext is gone. So now it's pretty obvious that it wasn't about the barricade. So now the U.S. has gone to the UN, attempted to get consensus around a military invasion into Haiti, but that basically failed because of Russia and China, who said, no, we're willing to go along with sanctions, international sanctions, but we're not going to approve a military invasion, particularly when you look at the history of what the UN so-called peacekeepers have done in Haiti in previous decades, with the U.S. leading the way. So now the U.S. is like, well, we got to find somewhere else. So they are kind of, I think, probing to figure out who they can get to go along with this invasion of Haiti. They had tried Canada. Canada seems to be a bit hesitant, and I think it's largely because they know, the Canadians, just like the U.S., know that if there's basically an invasion that doesn't have the patina of international consensus, then it's going to spark a mass uprising in Haiti and rally the population around whoever's resisting it. And the person who's going to be resisting it, the group who is going to be resisting it, is exactly Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier and the FRG-9. And if you watch the special report that we filed, I asked him about that. What do you think about a possible U.S. invasion? And he's like, well, they're going to do what they're going to do. We'll be ready, is essentially his message. I'm not going to react one way or the other. So, very kind of cool and collected response. But the U.S. is just looking for any way, any avenue to be able to get some kind of image of popular kind of united global support for this so-called intervention in Haiti.
Well, that's why it's so important that we, are able to cover this story, and your reporting has been so important. So, because most Americans, most of the world get these New York Times reports or an Associated Press report, and they think that that's gospel, or they think that that's the truth, when in fact, you're there, boots on the ground, covering this story, and can debunk a lot of this garbage from the mainstream media, the corporate media. So very, very important. This is the power of independent journalism. So, Dan, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I want to encourage all of our viewers to go and check out the special report. We'll have it linked up in the video below. It's about a 30-minute special report documentary on Dan's trip there just last week, coming back from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I encourage all of you to watch it. Dan, thanks so much. Great to see you.
Thank you, Clayton. Appreciate it.
And we'll also have linked up in the description below too. Just Dan also put together a 3-part documentary with his team on Haiti as well. So very important information to be educated about what's going on in the world, and the U.S. sticking their nose in. It's amazing to see the New York Times, the Associated Press, really the only people that were covering this, and they're covering it wrong, of course. And so, it's amazing. This is all we have, like this corporate media garbage that exists.
It's like a repeat of the story, like the story that was told in Ethiopia, is that there's no aid, these people have nothing, so we have to. Right.
Yeah.
So anytime we see this now, we're like, how do they know that?
No, we should all question this stuff.